Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue that holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's kick off the episode.
The seals of the apocalypse have been broken.
So with today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Darksiders franchise, and the reason for that being that Darksiders 3 finally has a release date. Now this is a game that's been through a tortured development period, and we're going to talk more about that in this episode, but it now has a very interesting release date, and that posed a lot of questions as well. And we're going to break down all of this sort of information in this week's episode of The Insider, so let's get into it.
Shattered by war's betrayal, will you answer our call, Rider of the Black Horse? To hunt down and destroy the enemies of existence itself. The 7 deadly sins have escaped and are ravaging the earth. They must be stopped.
Hello, brother.
So let's next talk about the story behind the Darksiders franchise before we get to Darksiders 3 and everything that's to come in the future. Because there's a lot of history that goes into this game, a lot of really interesting history, and there was a real possibility that we wouldn't be getting this game. It's been a long time in gestation, as it is. So the Darksiders franchise kicked off back in 2010, courtesy of the original Darksiders, which has been ported and is available on your PS4, your Xbox One, your PC, courtesy of the War Mastered Edition. Horrible name, but go pick it up, fantastic game. And then the sequel released in 2012, Darksiders 2, came to PS4, Xbox One, PC via the Definitive Edition. Again, another shocking name. But these games were fantastic. They were very Zelda-esque. They kind of picked and chose the best aspects of Zelda, of God of War of the time, of Portal. Like there's a whole bunch of puzzle aspects. There was the action adventure that you expect from Zelda and God of War, and they merged all these things into this wonderful, beautiful product. And both games were fantastic and criminally underappreciated, I might add. But we nearly didn't see a third game, and the concept was there. They wanted to create a game that had all 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse coming together. In the first game you played as War, in the second game you played as Death, but they wanted to see all 4 come together in a larger experience. And then things started to go wrong. THQ, who was the publisher of the game, and Vigil Games, it all collapsed when THQ went bankrupt. And that meant that Vigil Games were up for sale. The Darksiders IP was up for sale. Vigil didn't get picked up, they fell apart. The Darksiders IP got picked up by Nordic Games. And people were unsure as to what this meant for the IP going forward, as well as a whole bunch of other IP from THQ at the time. But then the pieces started to come back together again. Nordic Games bought the THQ name and became THQNordic. They picked up Koch Media, they pulled in some of its IP, but amongst all this was the Darksiders franchise. It came with Nordic, and it allowed the new team at Gunfire Games, which is helmed by a lot of ex-Vigil staff, to continue working on the project they want to work on. Now, we may see in the final product that it has all 4 horsemen in it, and you might get to play them somehow, there might be some online, who knows. But at the moment, this looks to be a more traditional Darksiders experience. We are playing as Fury in this game, and we get to play it this November 27th. The game that nearly never existed is going to be here soon. It got through all the dark days, and we're going to talk about that release date and what it all means next. So let's talk about Darksiders 3, the game, a little bit. We've seen little splashes of the game so far, and nothing super meaty. And that's despite IGN having the first debut of the trailer last year. In the last 24 hours, they've had a debut of some gameplay. We've seen some other trailers. They announced the release date. Like, there's been lots of exclusives along the way, but we've not seen this big blowout. That we haven't seen this massive monster yet that we've got to try and take on that really adds some weight and impact to the game so far. What we've seen so far is a lot of what we've come to expect from the moment-to-moment gameplay of previous Darksiders games. And that's cool. What I'm seeing in Fury so far is a character who moves fast, just like Death did. And everyone loved Death as opposed to what we got when we played War in the original game. War was cool, but he was a little slow and lumbering and clunky. But Death with his scythe was really fast and could strafe around opponents and take them out really easily. And we're seeing the same sort of thing with Fury. But we're not seeing how that can be applied to a really big, heavy boss yet. And I'm curious to see how that will work, because her thing is she doesn't have this fast movement and kind of a short-range weapon like Death and his scythe. We have a whip in the case of Fury, and that adds range to what she's doing as well. So it'll be interesting to see how these different dynamics all come together. Visuals-wise, the game's looking gorgeous. It's channeling the same artistry that we saw in previous games, and it's dragging and dropping it in this Darksiders 3 game. We're not seeing any hints of this this kind of combination of the characters from all the other games. So that includes War, that includes Death. Obviously we're getting Fury here, we're getting Strife. Fury and Strife aren't the original Horsemen of the Apocalypse, but they've been renamed to kind of fit more in line with what they're trying to achieve in this game, in this franchise. We're not seeing that sign yet of what the original plan was to start bringing them all together, but that's not to say that it won't happen. Maybe there's some sort of online mode, maybe it's a separate thing, I don't know. I'd probably rather that not be the case. We're seeing a very traditional Darksiders game here, and that ticks every box for me. I loved what they did in the previous games. Darksiders 2 was a fantastic jump from what we saw in the original game. It took some massive steps, it looked gorgeous, it added more of this open world sort of element, something that I assume will be present in Darksiders 3 as well. It seems to be going with the bigger, better, more badass thing. We just haven't seen much of the badass yet, and I'd love to see that before the game comes out this November. But that November release date, that's the interesting thing that we need to talk about here. Previous Darksiders games have come out either very early in the year, like the original Darksiders did, it was a January-February release of its respective year, or in that August period, like Darksiders 2 did. They've, to this point, not strayed into the big, heavy hitter window of any respective year. And Darksiders isn't a big, heavy-hitting franchise, at least not yet. What this tells me is that there's a lot riding for THQNordic, for Gunfire Games, for the Darksiders IP on sales numbers. And we've not seen fantastic sales numbers for either game to this point. There've been lots of giveaways through your PlayStation Plus or Xbox with games with gold, but we've not seen raw numbers for this franchise to this point. And maybe by releasing in November, that's exactly what they're trying to achieve this time. Put it in the spotlight, get eyes on it, and get sales consequently. But I'm really interested to see if they can pull this off. This holiday period is huge. Darksiders 3 has managed to separate itself from the majority of the pack in terms of its release date. The majority of games are launching in that late September to early November period. I'm talking about your Red Deads, I'm talking about Spider-Man, I'm talking about Dragon Quest, I'm talking about Smash Brothers, which actually comes afterwards. The big heavy hitters are thankfully a few weeks away from where Darksiders 3 has planted its flag. But there's still a lot of competition there, especially the Red Dead one. So many people are still going to be playing that game that they probably don't need to buy a new game for quite a while afterwards. Does all this affect the Darksiders 3 sales? Or does the fact that it's going to be in front of all these eyes offset that and allow the game to succeed? I really hope it does. I really hope THQNordic have made the right call with the release date here. He's hoping it gets some success. He's hoping that the game is awesome, because I love that franchise and I want it to do well. So that concludes another episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here, and that'll allow you access to weekly episodes of Patched, The Insider, The Video Games Club, Late Game Review, Player 2 Plays, and a whole lot more. There's some awesome content there, and we'd love for you to check it out. Hit that notification bell, and you'll be alerted to every video the moment it goes live. For written content, make sure to visit the website player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Rise draft, and heaps more. There is some awesome stuff there contributed by some of the best talent in Australia, so please make sure to go and check it out. We'd love for your support. And speaking of support, we're on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, and consider kicking in a few dollars. At the lower tiers, you'll get early access to episodes such as this, such as Patched, and at the higher tiers, you'll get exclusive episodes of Patched or this show. I haven't done one for this yet, but I'm really eager to do so, something a little more subjective. So if that's something you want, let me know in the comments. I'll be checking it out. And at the top tier, you can join us in the monthly Player 2 podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show, so please consider kicking in a few bucks and consider joining us. All those donations help the Player 2 dream to grow, so please consider helping out. We thank you in advance. For rolling updates, you can find me at PaulJamesP2 on Twitter. The website you can find at Player2au on Twitter. And until next time, keep an eye on that Darksiders 3 game. It's looking good. The Darksiders franchise needs some added love. Consider picking it up when it comes out in November. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later.